Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever looked at a map of the United States and wondered exactly how the country got its shape, well, it definitely didn't happen by accident. Today, we're diving into a massive historical flashpoint. We're talking about how a really intense disagreement over a single, solitary line on a map sparked an all-out war between 1846 and 1848. It's a conflict that literally redrew North America, bringing with it this wild story of expansion, grand strategy, and as we'll see, some pretty heavy moral questions. Now, why do border disputes easily lead to war? To really wrap our heads around how this started, imagine you're drawing a line in the dirt to separate your yard from your neighbor's. But neither of you can agree on where your yard ends and theirs begins. You both firmly believe you own the exact same patch of grass. You can see how quickly things would escalate if someone stepped over that invisible line, right? Well, that is exactly what happened here, just on a massive national scale. Okay, here's our roadmap for today. 1, the spark. 2, the strategy. 3, the treaty. 4, the aftermath. And 5, the lesson. Let's get right into it. Part 1, the spark. Drawing border lines. To figure out the why, we really have to rewind back to 1845, right after Texas joined the Union. So, when Texas entered the U.S., the United States claims the border was the Rio Grande. But Mexico? They strongly disagreed. They pointed to the Nueces River, which was way further north. What this does is create a highly disputed strip of land right between these two rivers, with both nations claiming it as their absolute own. Because they both claimed it, any clash of troops in that specific zone would instantly be framed by both sides as self-defense. It was quite literally a powder keg waiting for a match. And you guessed it, that match was struck. When U.S. and Mexican troops inevitably clashed in this disputed zone, President James K. Polk went straight to Congress. He used these exact words to declare war. American blood has been shed on American soil. Of course, Mexico fiercely disagreed about whose soil it actually was, viewing the U.S. presence there as an outright invasion. Part 2, the strategy, fighting the war. So once war is declared, you run into this massive logistical nightmare. How on earth do you fight across such a rugged, unforgiving landscape? Well, it certainly didn't happen overnight. Early battles in 1846, places like Palo Alto and Resaca de la Palma really showcased the devastating power of U.S. artillery. And that set the stage for a massive multi-year campaign moving south. Throughout 1846 and 1847, you had these incredibly intense fights at Monterrey and Buena Vista, but to actually end the war, the U.S. had to shift its strategy completely in 1847 with a massive landing at Veracruz, which ultimately led to the capture of Mexico City. To pull this off, the U.S. relied on a two-pronged approach. Step 1, General Zachary Taylor battled his way through the really harsh deserts of northern Mexico. Step 2, General Winfield Scott completely bypassed those impossible supply lines by launching an amphibious, seaborne invasion right onto the beaches of Veracruz. From there, he marched directly inland to capture Mexico City, basically breaking the ability for major military operations to continue. Part 3, the treaty, redrawing North America. Fast forward to 1848, the fighting stops, and a single document completely changes the map. When a war ends, terms have to be set, right? The famous Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo officially ended the fighting in 1848. First and foremost, it forced Mexico to recognize the Rio Grande as the official boundary. That essentially settled the bitter initial dispute that started the whole shebang. But more than that, it resulted in a huge transfer of land from Mexico to the United States. Now, it's crucial to point out this land wasn't simply seized without terms. There was a major financial exchange. In return for this vast region, and the U.S. agreeing to assume certain financial claims, the United States paid Mexico $15 million. And wow, just look at what the United States gained in what became known as the Mexican Cession. The sheer scale is mind-blowing. The land included all of present-day California, Nevada, and Utah, most of Arizona and New Mexico, and parts of Colorado and Wyoming. Almost overnight, the United States fulfilled its grand dream of westward expansion, becoming a true Pacific power. The map of North America as we know it today took shape right here. Part 4, the aftermath. New land. Tensions. Now, this explainer wouldn't be complete without looking at the what next, because, as we know, war answers some questions, but it almost always creates entirely new ones. The war might have ended, but the conflict back home, that was just getting started. Veterans returned to a fiercely divided Congress.
You see, acquiring all this new territory heavily intensified bitter sectional conflicts within the United States. The absolute biggest question was, would slavery be allowed to spread into these brand new lands? There were also deep, intense debates about citizenship and how to integrate the diverse populations now living within U.S. borders. The treaty settled a border, sure, but it opened up a terrible debate that would ultimately set the stage for the American Civil War.
And this brings up a brilliant quote that gets to a core truth about international relations. Borderlines on a map can be drawn quickly. Trust between neighbors takes far longer to build. This war shaped relations between the U.S. and Mexico for generations. It's a stark reminder that while drawing a line and signing a piece of paper is fast, trust is incredibly fragile. Understanding that really invites a lot of humility when we look at foreign policy and the long-term human cost of these decisions. Part 5. The lesson: morality and peace. As we wrap up today, let's look at the ultimate takeaway presented in our source material and why studying these historical conflicts actually matters to us today. Looking back, the source material contrasts this opportunistic expansion with a specific principle found in Romans 12:18, which says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. The source uses this scripture to really challenge us, asking whether historical conflicts were truly about justified defense or just a failure to do everything possible to maintain peace. It holds up history as a mirror to humanity's choices when ambition takes over. Which brings us to a concept outlined in the source as the Heroes Mart Academy philosophy. Education without morality will hurt. The argument here is super simple but profound. What is the point of being smart, knowing brilliant military strategies, and being highly educated, if that knowledge only ends up causing conflict and pain? The source essentially argues that true education requires a moral compass. Otherwise, knowledge just becomes a tool for creating larger, more devastating disasters. So our source material leaves us with a pretty sharp contrast. A mind focused purely on conflict and taking what it wants brings chaos, but anchoring our education in morality brings peace. As you walk away today with a better understanding of how quickly a line in the dirt can turn into a massive, world-changing war, the ultimate question the source leaves us with is this: how will you choose to build peace today? Thanks for tuning into this explainer, and we'll catch you next time.